There's a classic storytelling plot called The Quest. In The Quest, an often reluctant hero sets out to do something, overcomes obstacles along the way, and returns home a changed person. Think Frodo in Lord of the Rings. Well, my story is just like this, except that I wasn't reluctant, I'm not a hero, and my obstacles were few and minor. But I did return home a changed man. My goal was to visit Hostetter, Pennsylvania, and find the house that my father had grown up in using the hand-drawn map that he'd given me years ago. Google Maps told me Hostetter was just about 3 hours away via Interstate 76. But I wasn't in a hurry, so I decided to take an older, slower route, what's left of the Lincoln Highway, built in 1913 to connect Times Square to San Francisco. And once off the interstate, I found surprises, beauty, and sadness. In Pennsylvania, I drove a twisty road up and up until I topped a ridge, and there I was surprised by a Midwestern panorama that reminded me of those I'd seen in New Mexico. Different, but just as beautiful in its own way. Then more beauty. On a street corner in Bedford, Pennsylvania, a gas station has somehow kept all of its Art Deco glory, like a fly preserved in amber. At the diner, my daily special of sloppy joes and deep-fried green beans came with a big helping of nostalgia, and not a bit of guilt. Then I was in Hostetter, a tiny coal mining town where the coal and the mine are both long gone, and this shabby building is what's left of the company store. From here I started walking the streets of The Patch, the cluster of houses built for mine workers around 1900. My dad had strangely not marked his house on the map, so I wandered aimlessly until I saw an old lady shaking out a rug on her back porch. I asked if she remembered the Wascos from way back when, and she pointed right across the street. There was the house that they'd shared with the Sobieskis, she told me. I'd found it. That night I slept in a tiny cabin in the Lincoln Motor Court. Knotty pine paneling took me back to childhood vacations long ago, and a propane space heater took its good old time warming me on a 24-degree night. The next morning I stopped at another gas station, this time one that had fallen on hard times. I love the visual beauty of faded paint and rusted steel, but there's a sadness there as well. More sadness, this time in the form of a partly completed memorial to Flight 93, the hijacked airliner that was forced to crash on September 11, 2001 by the passengers and crew. The memorial's mishmash of shapes and materials left me more annoyed than inspired. I think it deserves better. Now fast forward a couple of days and I'm driving north after visiting friends in Yellow Springs, Ohio. Google Maps recommended I-75 north to where I could get back on the Lincoln Highway for the last leg of my trip. But here Route 63 stretched straight ahead, and I decided to just keep going. Here was my revelation. This slower way of travel was totally different from getting somewhere on the interstate. No traffic, no trucks, no stress. I slowed to drive through small towns, glancing at houses and monuments that each would be worth a visit someday. Bucyrus, Ohio turned out to be my favorite. The county courthouse still looks as majestic as the day it was built. Other buildings in town showed their age, but their beauty still shines through. I hope that the good citizens of Bucyrus managed to keep them alive. And the promise of good home-cooked meals here lured me in, but it was a friendly bartender that made lunch a high point of my trip. A smile and a little conversation was a human connection, a welcome break from my solitary drive. And another revelation. I was near the end of my Lincoln Highway trip just outside of Mansfield. An abandoned GM plant looked like something from a science fiction movie. All the buildings intact, but completely lifeless. And finally, back to normal, on Interstate 71 heading north. I wasn't traveling anymore, I was getting somewhere, to Cleveland, as fast as possible. I set the cruise control to 65 and started counting down the miles. My quest was over, but I'd learned that travel is different from getting somewhere. Faster isn't always better. Beauty is where you find it.